Are you looking for an unusual Valentine's wreath to make this year? Today I'm starting with a wreath that is significantly bigger than my head. It's actually huge. And I'm going to make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to go with my favourite colour of dusky pink. There's quite a lot of dusky pink around. And I'm going to create a double layered heart. So it's going to make for a really pretty wreath that will stand out on a front door. Okay, let's have a look. This Valentine's heart is really impressive, and if you've got a few evenings to dedicate to putting it together, it's both lovely to have as decor on your door and also something you can be proud of, knowing the work you've put into it. It's simple to make, but it does take some time, so if you've got that time, it is a lovely project to do. I had another heart I was going to put in the middle of this large wicker one, but I decided actually that the shapes of them were too different, so decided to make one instead for the middle. I will show you the process of making that at the end because that's not going to be relevant for all of you. If you have a smaller heart wreath, then you can just go ahead and use that instead. So I've made my MDF heart. It's painted and dried and ready to attach. I'm going to be attaching yarn to the entirety of this heart shape. However, to keep the heart in a good position to be able to do that process, I'm going to use some sturdier wire to keep it in the middle to start with. With that in place, I'm threading my dusky pink yarn into this plastic needle. Now this plastic needle is actually really helpful because it's got some bend to it. It helps wiggle in and out of the wicker, which doesn't have much bend to it. A metal needle would be a bit tougher to get into those tight spots, so this was a helpful tool. To start with, you simply tie the yarn to somewhere near the back of the wreath, somewhere where it's less visible. I put enough yarn through the needle so that I would be able to wrap around the heart around 4 or 5 times. You don't want to add so much yarn that you're constantly pulling it through the wicker or the inner heart, because then the yarn is going to start to deteriorate and get a bit fluffy. It is not so strong that it can tolerate being threaded through all that much. You want to keep the yarn pretty tight as you go. If it is saggy in the middle, it's going to be harder to solve that at the end. So just pay attention to pulling it tight on each layer. But again, not overstretching it so it gets too taut and thin. It's just a bit of a balance, but it is not difficult. I started on one side of the heart, but then moved to the opposite side of the heart and essentially just spread out where I started doing the first sections of yarn. This is so that the inner heart didn't get pulled too far to one side, which would be difficult to correct later on. After you've done enough of the yarn, you can remove the wire that was keeping the heart there in place. It essentially just keeps it nice and sturdy while you're doing the looser bits of the yarn at the start. Personally, I found this really relaxing to do, however, I didn't want to be standing up and doing it forever, so I took it to my sofa to finish off. And it took me a couple of evenings as well. In total, this, believe it or not, actually took about 6 hours to string. If you haven't done anything like that before, it might seem a bit unbelievable. If you're sitting down relaxing, it's actually a very enjoyable process. Depending on the look you're going for, you might want to entirely cover this piece. You might want to leave it partially strung together. There were points when it was just partially filled in that I thought it looked really pretty. And I also liked it when it looked much denser too, so I don't think you need to fill it in completely, either if you don't prefer that look or if you don't have the time. There are lots of different ways you could complete this to create a lovely look. It does get a little bit untidy on the back, but it's not really an issue because nobody's going to see it. When you finish a length of the yarn, you can simply knot a new piece together with it. This shouldn't be visible from the front, but if it is, you can just wiggle the knot to the back and then it is well hidden. You could mix up your colours of your yarn and do a rainbow design. You could do the yarn on just one half, or you could make it thinner for a completely different look as well. It's simple and versatile and an enjoyable process. The only bit that was a little bit tricky is where you see the dip of the inner heart, and the yarn did struggle to stay on that point. With enough yarn, it did eventually stay there in place, or you could just do a dab of hot glue and that would help the yarn stay in place too. If you have cats, you might find they very much enjoy being curious about the ball of yarn. I had both of my cats come and investigate and all pounce on this as I was doing it, but hey, it's nice to keep all the family involved. This makes for such a lovely Valentine's wreath, either for your front door or for your wall. And you can make it on a much smaller scale as well, but I love how big this wreath is. It looks pretty huge, which actually I think makes it look even more impressive. And knowing the time I put into it, it feels really special to see it on my front door. I even played with adding some flowers as an addition, and I like both versions, both the more simplistic and the more romantic floral feel as well. I'm really impressed with this yarn wreath. It's really simple to do, but looks lovely. And you could mix it up and add flowers in between the yarn strands as well. Do a larger heart for more negative space in the middle. There are lots of ways you could create this. So how to make that inner heart? I recently got a laser cutter and engraver, so I used that to make my inner heart. First of all, I took a photo of the heart that I had. That was so I could import that into the software. So I've got my template that I want to match as closely as possible. The original heart shape is just one line, so there's no thickness to it. So you do need to have those two lines to create a solid object. For this, I used the outline tool to give me that second line around the edge and made it about 1 inch wide. It doesn't need to be super strong because it's only going to be holding the yarn, but if I did something like cardboard, then it could start to bend, especially with the pulling motion of the yarn. I've cut MDF before, so I already knew what my settings needed to be, and it simply took 5 minutes to cut out this shape. MDF is not the most beautiful colour at any time, but certainly not underneath this pretty Valentine's wreath. I went to my shed to find the closest match I had to the dusky pink yarn and found a silk paint called Conch. And did just one coat across the front and edges of the heart. So simply where any of the yarn moved or wasn't 100% covered, you would see pink underneath rather than the brown of the MDF. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing for some Easter projects that are coming up, which are going to be just as adorable. Thanks so much. Until next time. Bye.